You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. The Options Insider Radio Network is sponsored by Fidelity Investments. Fidelity's Option Trade Builder tool can help you confidently build an options trade in 3 simple steps. Just choose a strategy, select a contract, and then review the benefits and risks of the trade. Learn more about Option Trade Builder at fidelity.com/options. Options trading entails significant risk and is not appropriate for all investors. Certain complex option strategies carry additional risk. Before trading options, contact Fidelity Investments by calling 800-544-5115 to receive a copy of the characteristics and risks of standardized options. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE SIPC. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody, that music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program where we break down everything that's going on that other side of the fence there, on the crypto side of the fence. So we're going to talk spot, we'll talk the futures, we're going to talk the options, the altcoin, all that good stuff. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, I'm the ever-exciting The Options Insider Radio Network. Welcome to all of our continued flood of new listeners here on this program. We love to see you guys coming in from all over the place. We love our options listeners, but we also love all the new listeners who are discovering this program outside of the traditional options meccas out there. If you want to keep that flow coming, you want to help new people continue to discover the program and indeed the crypto derivatives market as a whole, make sure wherever you're listening to this, you leave a review. So your iTunes, your TuneIns, your Stitchers, even more so than our other programs, which have been running for ages. This one's a new one, and we have a whole new audience coming in. So keep those new folks discovering it. iTunes, Google Podcast, Spotify, wherever you listen to the program, make sure you leave a nice review so folks can understand what they're getting themselves into, and they can help other folks discover the program in turn. Well, keep paying it forward here. And joining me to help me break down this crazy madhouse world of crypto derivatives here on the program are a returning friend of the show. He is John Pearlstone from CryptoPatterns.net. John, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown.
Thank you so much, Mark. How's my sound? A little technical difficulty over here. Am I coming through okay?
Sound fine to me, so I think we're good to go to keep on rolling right on into the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trading activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, let's do it. Let's break down them there. Bitcoin's coming into showtime today. We're seeing a Bitcoin right around 87.5 or so right now, which puts it down about 600 and change handles from where it was last show. Remember last show, not an entire week. We had a show on Tuesday last week so we could bring on the folks from SKEW, formerly SK3W. Now it's just plain old SKEW.com. They spent some of that money they raised to buy the appropriate domain. So check them out, of course. A lot of the data, a lot of the stats we provide here during the show coming courtesy of that platform. So a decent week, a little bit quieter week, at least not for most asset classes it wouldn't be. For crypto, it was, Bitcoin in particular. We hit our high of the week actually during our show last week, or right around that time, actually the day before our show, it was on Monday, of 94.25 or so. Hit the low actually earlier today, 84.68, and now we've kind of bounced off that a little bit. Speaking of bouncing off things, John, maybe we'll start there because it's kind of been an interesting period here for Bitcoin from a technical level. I believe we have a listener question about this a little bit later too, but we'll touch on some of it now in terms of hitting some lows, rebounding, moving all over the place. Certainly there's been a lot of movement since the last time you've been on, particularly in the last couple of weeks. We had that infamous week, of course, where China started talking up all things crypto and blockchain. That was enough to send everything off to the races. So walk us through what's been lighting up your tape, what's been on your radar from a technical perspective out there in Bitcoin over the past few weeks, John.
Well, it really feels, and when you look at the longer-term charts, it's a lot of volatile bounces off support and resistance, and won't call it range bound. You said it earlier. You stole a little bit of my commentary, which is for any other asset class, these are huge moves, but really Bitcoin and the large altcoins are staying kind of tight to their key price levels. And we saw the big move up and then the sharp move down and now the move back up. But that 9,500 number I've talked to you about for several months now continues to stay in range. And, it seems to be rotating around that pretty well. When we get a little further, I can talk about the patterns we're seeing on the longer term charts that say we should be heading to the upside of this range shortly. But overall, it's the kind of thing you can trade if you have a liquid market to do so. But if you're looking to hold for the next big move, in terms of the weekly or monthly type of moves, you're kind of in a consolidation pattern.
Yeah, we can only imagine if we saw, let's say, Apple or the SPY or anything else moving the double-digit percentages a week that we've seen Bitcoin moving. It would be all over the news. It would be the biggest headline dominating the tape across the board. And yet, Bitcoin does it. Everyone's like, oh, it's Bitcoin. It's volatile. We expect that. So, yeah, it has been a crazy volatile time. Let's break down some of that volatility. It's actually a little less volatile now than it was a couple of weeks ago. I think that's pretty understandable. We're not moving 20-odd% at a clip anymore the way it was that week. So we're seeing the 30-day realized kind of staying the same. That frame of reference hasn't changed much because there has been some big moves over the course of that last 30 days. Down just about a couple of points, down about 73% from 75%. Where we've seen the interesting action is, of course, on the implied because, as we know, the implied gaps up whenever things start lighting up. And then it comes in once things settle down a little bit. We're seeing the latter portion of that right now. It was north of the 80s, got into the 90s for a little while there in the heat of all the madness. And then last show it was 65%. Has come off that. Even now, this show is down to about 58%. So still volatile, still frothy. You can put it up there with some of your more active, volatile equity options out there and things like that. But it's certainly not triple digits or threatening it the way it was a few weeks ago. Let's go out to the options side out there. Look at what's lighting it up out there on Deribit, at least until we get these much ballyhooed Bitcoin options coming from CME sometime in Q1. Then we can sink our teeth into those. Until then, got to make do with the leading platforms out there like Deribit and others. And it was kind of overall a pretty mild week on the volume front. Remember, we use that 30 million value level as kind of a barometer for when a day is somewhat active. Most of the days were below that threshold, with a couple of exceptions coming on the 6th, with about almost 41 million going up on the 6th. And on the 7th, the big day, about 69, almost 70 million. That was a pretty active day. Outside of that, it's funny, actually, our frame of reference goes back to actually through last week, which is last Tuesday, to include last Monday. And looking at that, it's kind of funny because the big vertical we profiled on the show last week is still the big print of the week here this week. It was a March 12,000, 16,000 vertical. Looked like maybe paper bought it, but again, we talked with the SKEW guys last week about how these sides are reported and how all this data is parsed and what kind of metrics they actually get. And obviously in the option space, we usually get spread tags and execution where it goes up amongst the spread. A little bit different in the crypto space. I encourage you to check out that program if you haven't done it yet to see how this stuff is reported on the crypto space, a little bit different. We're also seeing the D7500 puts. That's one of the big prints of the week. Again, we look for things that are size-wise north of that 50 Bitcoin level. Then we try to parse them from there. It wasn't a lot, but 250 of the D7500 puts. Also that same day, 6,000 puts went up about 184 times, but didn't go up marked spread or even as a spread really around at the same time. There were a few hours separating them, but similar strikes, kind of similar size. So maybe a bit of a ratio, maybe a bit of a roll down there. Either way, 7,500 and 6,000 puts. Pretty active in December outside of that March 12,000, 16,000 call spread that we talked about last week. Term structure is kind of the same from a vol perspective out here. It was very backward a couple of weeks ago, as you would expect, when everything was hitting the fan with China. It's since come off. The front portion of the curve has calmed down. That November 8th contract has come off the board as well, so we're out to the 15th. That 15th is actually a little bit below here, a 50 vol, which is kind of interesting. Then it kind of slopes up from there. It's like the vol peaks out into June next year around, looks like a 75 or so, 75% over here on this. Call the put, also down this week. Remember last week, the calls were firmly in charge. Almost 2/3 of the paper was on the call side. This week, it's pretty much 50-50. Actually, almost exactly that. 50.5% is the call to put ratio right now. So pretty much 50-50 calls to puts. There's no one leading the dance out here this week. Open interest, similar story. It's down a bit. It was up to 555 million last show. This week, down to about 513 million. So that takes us off quite a bit. A lot of that seems to have come off from the Nov 8th contract rolling off the board last week. If you look at the numbers where they're breaking down, the November 8th contract was a pretty sizable one. It was about over 10,000 contracts were open out there. So a lot of that went off the board. Hasn't really been replaced yet, hence the OI coming off a little bit. Looking at the numbers right now in terms of where the size OI is shaping up, it's still Dees. Dees continues to just aggregate, suck up all the liquidity in the room. 30,000 plus contracts are open out there right now. The next closest now is the November 29th contract with about 10,400. It would have been the November 8th, but that's gone now. So we're looking to maybe replace some of that. That hasn't really caught up yet. Dees, I should say, is still leading the dance pretty firmly out here. We get out into the futures next. I know, John, the futures are kind of an interesting spot for you guys. I know you focus a lot of your analysis and your metrics on the futures. I think in the past you've said that you can start seeing some of these moves shaping up in the futures, maybe even before you do on the spot. Are the futures still front and center for a lot of your analysis over there at Crypto Patterns, John?
They are. And as far as I can tell, there's been a little rumbling over the last, I had it in front of me, I want to say last couple of weeks with some increased volume, a little wider range each day. But, to be really honest, other than the big spike, that we ran into with the China news, you're kind of reaching to draw any conclusions right now. But it is always worth noting when activity picks up on the futures. We saw, an increase. It wasn't high volume, but it was increasing volume over days, and that's usually a sign that at least there's more interest going on. You've got some updates on the backed exchange. Seems like maybe there's some correlation there that interest is picking up among the larger investors.
Before I dive into all that futures volume really quickly, you mentioned earlier that your longer-term analysis is shaping up maybe a little bit different from your kind of shorter-term, near-dated Bitcoin analysis. Anything you can share with our listeners on that front, long-term maybe versus shorter-term? Yeah,
there's a nice reversal pattern on the monthly chart, and we actually posted that on your site if anybody wants to check that out. And that usually has a high probability, if everything else lines up, of seeing higher prices than the prior month at some point before we see things go down. And, those sorts of things are not guaranteed, of course, but the longer time frame you see reversal patterns, the more likely they are to work. So on a monthly, they're pretty reliable. And you're seeing, nice recoveries from spikes down, which appear to be stop runs to, shake out weak hands. We're not going back below that 7,300 level. You have to ask why. We're not seeing high volume on down drops. You have to ask why. So, I wouldn't say things look, free and clear. We're going to skyrocket, but, I like the trade with a stop under the current, last month's lows. That is a solid pattern that's tradable.
Let's see what's tradable out here on the futures. A kind of a light week, kind of following in step with the options. Not a huge amount of volume until we get to back. We'll get to that in a little bit. Light volume out here. Let's start with CME because they're still the big dog out here. Light volume day coming into the showtime. We had about 3,500 contracts on that front no future. Remember, that's a 5X coin, so 5X there for the multiplier, and the rest of the month's not really doing a ton. Last week was kind of the same story. The big day of the week was Friday, about 5,800 contracts. Thursday, about 3,500. Wednesday, pretty light, only 1,400 on the tape. Tuesday, about 3,100. And Monday, nearly 4,000 on the tape. As John mentioned, Bakkt actually making a little bit of headlines. People have been writing into us nonstop since Bakkt launched, effectively saying, hey, what's going on with Bakkt? What are they doing from a volume perspective? What are they doing from a volume perspective? Are they going to launch options? All these questions. To the latter one, we say we don't know. They got to build up some futures volume first. And it seems like they're making some inroads on that front. Their volume just hit a new high, and they hit 15.3 million. Largest single day trading volume so far in their history, about 15.3 million worth. Remember, they quote it all in the notional, which I hate, but that's kind of just the convention in crypto. We have to just make our peace with it until this market evolves a little bit more and we can see real quality contract numbers being tossed around out there. So 15.3 million on Friday. That surpasses its previous high of about 10.25 million that came back at the end of October on October 25th. So all of you out there who've been kind of hand-wringing, saying, hey, what's going to happen with Bakkt? Maybe the worm is turning a little bit out there. Their monthly volume here for futures is 106.7 million. That puts it at a little over 12,000 Bitcoin. Actually, that goes back to their launch on the 23rd. So the total volume they've transacted is about a little over 12,000 Bitcoin out there. So interesting stuff, not exactly blowing the doors off yet. But again, I think for our audience, everyone wants a variety of venues out there that you could trade a lot of stuff at, that they're all deep and liquid. That benefits everyone at the end of the day. They can arb between venues. They could do spreads, all that fun stuff. Our audience lives on a little bit on the bleeding edge. They like that kind of thing. So hopefully we'll get multiple venues out there trading it up, and everyone will have a good time out there. Speaking of trading things up, looks like October, the numbers are in for October, was a good month for Bitcoin out there. Actually, a lot of people like to make this comparison. We've talked about this before, actually, John and I, about, is Bitcoin kind of the digital gold? Is it really this flight to quality type asset? Well, people like to compare it to gold as a result. And in October, it was a good month for the crypto versus the actual shiny stuff. Bitcoin outperforming gold for the first time since this summer. So not that long ago, back to June. You got to look, don't have to go back to multiple years or anything to find the last time Bitcoin beat gold. Just go back to June. But it was still a good month for Bitcoin. It was up about 10.25%. Gold managed a paltry 2.75% in October. So the crypto, the digital stuff, outshining the actual tangible stuff in October. John, is this still a commentary or a question or a correlation? People are still coming to you asking over their crypto patterns. Are they asking you about Bitcoin versus gold still? Is that still a common question, or has that kind of died down a bit?
I would say it's died down a little bit simply because, gold was skyrocketing and now it's stabilized. But if you think about it, so did Bitcoin. Their timing was a little off, but they both really had big moves this year. So I think it's still an issue. It really needs to be watched. You're looking for those dramatic moves either way or a divergence, one taking off, one dropping to see who's playing the games to really move these markets. But we're absolutely watching it, and I think it will mean something. I mean, gold's in a little bit of a correction now. It's still an incredibly bullish chart. So, as is Bitcoin, by the way. If you look at it, again, I'm very focused on those longer-term charts because the volatility has been so much lower than historically year over year. So I would say we're keeping our eye on it. Haven't seen much over the last month or two since I last talked to you. But when big moves show up, it's the first place I go to see how it's compared to what's going on with the metals.
Yeah, that does seem to still be a standard comparison. People are always making these analogies to the crypto flight to quality. Whenever something crazy happens in China or somewhere else, we see these big moves in Bitcoin as a result. That conversation usually rears its ugly head again. So probably haven't seen the last of it, at least for October. The digital side taking the crown as we keep on rolling to explore the entirety of the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, let's get into it. Let's get into the rest of the crypto universe. Let's look first at some market cap. Remember, take the overall market cap numbers with a pretty huge and hopefully flavorful grain of salt, while I think the percentages are probably a little bit more reliable here. Obviously, Bitcoin still number one, about 157 billion. Number two, is ETH, a little bit north of 20 billion. That puts it at about 12.75% market cap. Number 3, our old friend Ripple, still tied up in all this legal woes, with a little bit shy of 11 billion overall market cap. That puts it at about 7%, a little bit shy of 7% actually. Number 4, Bitcoin Cash, about 5.25 billion. That puts it at about 3.3% market cap. And number 5, Litecoin, a little bit shy of 4 billion, puts it at about exactly 2.5%. Let's throw EOS in there as well. You guys like that one as well. That gets it about 3.5 billion. So it's closing in on Litecoin. Post-halving, Litecoin hasn't seen the love fest that it had leading into that halving. Let's see, EOS at about 2.25%. So it's closing in. Maybe it'll break into the top 5 soon here, and we could talk about it officially here on the show. Before we get into the altcoin, I know, John, you've been kind of, I guess, lackluster on the whole altcoin segment out there. I know in the last time you've been on, you're kind of saying that there, except for I think one, maybe EOS it was that you were liking out there. Outside of that, it really wasn't a place where you guys were focusing a lot of your technical analysis because it just didn't perform well in the altcoin. Is that still the case, or is altcoin starting to come on your radar again?
It's always watched, kind of like gold, but I don't know how anyone can look at it without, coming to the conclusion that it will behave the way Bitcoin behaves in terms of direction, in terms of volatility. I mean, at best, at least in the current market so far this year, it just has moved consistent at a direct correlation, sometimes at a higher rate, sometimes at a lower rate. But you got to start all technical analysis of Bitcoin, which is running the show. I do feel like, and you mentioned it, but I'll hit it again, I feel like Litecoin's a great indicator. It outperformed all the other large altcoins early this year, pulled back even further on the latest pullback. So it's kind of blended back in, but I do think it's got, some name recognition. It's got a use case people understand. So I think it's worth watching as an altcoin indicator. And I'm going to go 2. I'm going to add one for you real quick. You remember I told you last time we talked that Ripple was technically just destroyed. I think it was below 25 cents or right at that point.
Yes.
And I said, it'll just pop up over 30 when it feels like it. It's just behaving completely separate from technical analysis because it kind of just does whatever whoever's manipulating it wants to do, or that when they're, matching up their portfolios with Bitcoin or whatever. And that's exactly what happened. It's hovered around 30 back towards 25. So that's another indicator. You can't over rely on the altcoins. And then EOS, I do like their story if they ever can get their act together, because they're essentially trying to become a competitor with Facebook. And if you see this Libra thing falling apart, and if you see, litigation or government issues taking on Facebook, that might be a very real alternative or privacy issues. They haven't gotten where they need to be to make this happen, but that's what they're trying to do. And there's really no other large altcoin trying to compete in that space.
Yeah, you touched on a lot there. Ripple is a good one because you're right. It's kind of beyond any sort of really fundamental or even technical analysis right now because it's caught up in all this litigation. And that's kind of exists outside of any real analysis that a market watcher can do, because it's all up to what's going on in the courtroom. They're being sued about whether they issued XRP and it should have been licensed as, a security versus if it wasn't. The outcome of that trial could have long-standing ramifications for XRP as a whole and for Ripple as a whole. So people are watching that, not so much for the outcome of that specific trial, but more what that could mean for the long-term future of how this is treated as a security or is it not, and a lot of these other coins as well. So all of that is kind of outside of the realm of any sort of analysis, which makes it challenging from a trading perspective. Coming at Showtime, it's off yet again, down about another pretty bad week actually, down about 2.5 cents here. That puts it firmly shy of that 30-cent level that John was just referring to, which it was almost exactly at last show, a little bit north of it. Now it's back down to about 27.5 cents. As again, the whims of the legal woes of Ripple continue to blow it north and then south again. So it's kind of hard to sink your teeth into that one way or the other. One we do want to sink our teeth into. In fact, this is inspired by a question. I'm going to bump this up from Charlotte from our crypto question segment. We'll cheat and answer it early. Charlotte wants to know, are there any plans to incorporate ETH options onto the program? Well, yes. In fact, we were just talking about this with the SKEW folks last week. ETH is clearly number 2 from an overall, not just a market cap perspective, but also from a derivatives perspective. On the options side, on the future side, ETH clearly number 2 to Bitcoin out there. So I think that is something worth noting and incorporating. As we did mention with the SKEW guys last week, they do have a pretty robust ETH data set as well. So it's not all Bitcoin all the time. There is ETH on there as well for the options. Actually, the futures and the options, both available on there. So let's break it down. Let's start here. ETH come into showtime, down a little bit, down about 5 handles this week. Hit a high, let's see, right now it's at about 185, almost 186. It hit a high of about 193.5. That was back on the 6th, and it hit its low of about 182 and a third or so, right around on the 8th. So a little over $10, right around $11 range this week. So not a crazy week for ETH, but a decent week. Let's look at some of the metrics out here as well. Let's start breaking these down a little bit too, so we can start get a feel for how things are shaping up from a vol perspective out here in ETH. Again, this data coming courtesy of our friends over there in SKEW land here. The 30-day realized in ETH right now is about a 63%. 30-day implied, almost exactly the same, 63.5. That's kind of interesting. Usually you might see a little bit more discrepancy between those two. But again, ETH's not the biggest trading name yet from an options perspective, so that could be part of the reason why they're shaping up that way. If you're wondering how the call to put is looking out there, it's pretty much all calls all the time. 92% of the paper out there is on the call side of the ledger. And if you're wondering how much OI is out there, remember we talked about the Bitcoin options. They were a little bit shy of 550 million over there on Deribit. They're about 513 million right now. ETH is shy of about a tenth of that. ETH options have about 45, almost 46 million contracts outstanding out here. If you're wondering where the high came, it came at about 67, almost 68 million. And that looks like about back in September, actually, mid-September. So not too long ago, a couple months ago here. And now it's kind of off to about 45.7. So that's something I think we're going to start. Charlotte and everybody else who wanted to know more about maybe some ETH options and volatility, I think we're going to start working more of that into the show, because it's the number 2, and it's probably going to start picking up as we start listing more Bitcoin options. We've heard rumblings from CME and others about adjusting their ETH reference rates. So we're probably going to see more on the ETH product front down the road as well. So makes sense to start working that more into our analysis as well. We touched on Litecoin. Litecoin's kind of a quiet week, down about $1.20 from where it was last show. It's at about a 62 and change. Come into the latter portion of our show. We touched on Litecoin, John. Are you not as big of a fan of ETH out there? And a lot of people, ETH is a clear number 2. Is Litecoin the number 2 for you guys?
I feel it's a better market indicator. I mean, ETH is the most broadly used among the community because a lot of those ICOs were funded through ETH, and they were able to do forks and put all their. Bottom line with ETH is it's the leading technology, but it continues to not prove out that they've been able to make it work, and that's why I'm always nervous about it. In other words, it's kind of one of those things so many people are holding that it's got momentum. But remember, it was at $1,400 at 1.2. So I'm a bit skeptical on ETH. I will acknowledge that, and I'll touch on it when we get to our closing comments, because I feel like kind of as a representative of what's going on in the whole crypto market in terms of people waiting for something tangible. So I'll kind of leave it at that for the moment.
Yeah, I think you can probably have similar concerns about a lot of these underlyings at the end of the day. I know for our audience, they want a little bit of volume, a little bit of volatility, and they'll handle the rest. And ETH certainly delivers on those two fronts. But you're right. Long term, there could be a lot of questions, probably about a lot of these here, and I'm sure there are. And we've heard from a lot of you who do have those questions. But you guys want something that's tradable? We got it for you here, at least for the time being. Bitcoin Cash also moving a little bit. Quiet week out there for Bitcoin Cash, down about 5 handles from last show, putting out about a 288, 289 coming into the latter portion of the show here. And we already cheated. We got one question now. Let's get some more here as we keep on rolling into your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Crypto Questions, a portion of the show where you guys ask your legion of questions about all things crypto, the derivatives, the options, the futures, the spot, all that good stuff, the vol, the term structure. Good thing you're on, John. We got some technical stuff this week. Let's see. First up, we got a bit of a comment/question, I guess, here from Thanext. They want to know, it seems like the supports were holding up pretty firmly across the crypto space last week. I kind of agree with this listener here, John. I think it's fair to say I've always been a bit of a skeptic on the technical analysis front. It's not my first go-to here. But even I noted, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, even last week as well, we saw some pretty robust bouncing off of a specific level out there. I forgot, I think it was 2 weeks ago what the exact level was out there in Bitcoin, but it hit it and bounced right off of it and then came back down and bounced right off multiple times to the point where even a cynic like me had to admit there maybe something was afoot out there. Is that something you've noticed as well, John, in the last couple of weeks, maybe in particular, that to the downside in particular, which is where he seems to be focused and where I noticed it as well, that the supports were holding up pretty well out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly. We've been posting some of that on your guys' site as well. I mean, the strength has been impressive in a gigantic range, again, for any other market, but the downside support has been strong, and the only troubling thing is it keeps coming up to the top of the range, and it's not showing any strength breaking through resistance. So it's not a time to be going all in, but, if you're willing to play with some, good discipline and tight stops, there's a lot of reason for this market to go up, bottom line.
Yeah, I guess if there's anywhere you could probably see the weakness is to the upside. It can't really maintain it to the upside, but bouncing off, I think it was back after the initial Chinese furor all broke. 7,300 was a pretty strong level that I think it rebounded off several times. And there were a few others over the course of the last couple of weeks where it was clear that there was a support in there and it wasn't getting much through it. To the upside, yeah, different story. But I think I'm with you, and it sounds like John is as well. Thanexed or the next. Maybe it's a funky spelling of the next. Let's go with that. I think we're with you there. That it seems like to the downside at least, they were bouncing pretty firmly out here. Next up, we've got, I like this handle. Panic at the Disco wants to share here. He says that he or she can't wait for the CME Bitcoin options so I could finally trade bullish risk reversals on my actual brokerage platform. Hard to get them done on Deribit, and I don't want the VPN hassle. Yeah, we're with you. That's why we're excited to see these. Obviously, we like listed venues that are regulated and available here for our U.S. audience. We love the overseas stuff, too. We know we have a big and growing overseas crowd for this show. It's kind of hard to avoid because so much of the action in the crypto space is going on in Asia. God, 2/3 of our guests, it seems like on this show, are from Australia. So Australia is a big mecca. Europe as well. Pretty much everywhere but the U.S. is leading the dance when it comes to crypto regulation. So we love all of our international listeners, obviously, but we have a good, strong core audience here in the U.S. We like to have more choices, more options, pun intended, for you guys as well. So, yeah, we're excited about the CME stuff, too, as well, because, CME is not going away anytime soon. They're regulated. They're listed. You know where to find them. They're right across the street here. You can go talk to them if you have to. Call them up. They exist. They're not just going to vanish into the ether, pun intended. They're also not going to require you to VPN. You're not violating anyone's terms of service. If you're listed here in the U.S., you live in the U.S., and you want to trade the options on it, it's not some sort of Damocles hanging poised over your account to shut it down at any time. None of that nonsense. So, yeah, we're with you. Panic at the Disco. As for bullish risk reversal, I like a good bullish risk reversal. I haven't had a chance to go out there and parse and see if these are good setups for it in crypto. That said, if these supports are holding up in the way they seem to be in Bitcoin, that could be an attractive level maybe for the put wing of your bullish risk reversal. Then you set up the upside. Remember, we just said the upside is kind of where things fall apart a little bit, so you may have a little bit more challenge picking the right strike there. But it seems like the supports on the downside, where you might want to structure the short leg of that bullish risk reversal, that could be intriguing. I will have to admit that. I'll have to go dig in myself. Maybe you gave me some interesting ideas here, Panic at Disco. So I definitely agree with you. Oh, last up here, John, this sounds like this is the question for you. So it's a good thing you're on. This comes from Fascinating, funky spelling of fascinating. They write here, your technical guest, I'm guessing that's you, John. Your technical guest seemed kind of down on technical analysis for altcoin. Is that still the case? Well, we kind of just touched on this in the altcoin universe, but like I said, you've been a little dismissive in the past. It seems like you're opening the kimono a little bit, but it sounds like it's still pretty much mostly Bitcoin most of the time for you guys, John. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, in 3+ years of watching this day in and day out, and at some point you'll have me on and say, boy, you missed that one because now altcoins are, 3x or whatever they end up doing. We're always watching it. And the thing is, we're not down on TA for altcoins. There's no divergence. There's nothing that gives us a reason to think that there's meaning in the altcoin TA versus the far more prevalent Bitcoin TA. But some of the biggest moves are when you start to see changes between those two. So we're always watching for that. So my response to the question would be, Bitcoin rules the day, and it needs to be, kind of overriding all your technical analysis and trade strategies. But yeah, you've got to, trade what you see in front of you on the altcoins too. I'll add a little footnote on your prior Panic at the Disco comment, which is, I think it's a really good time to start. I don't know what, you guys recommend in your world, but paper trading some of these, approaches that you can't really get the liquidity because we don't have CME involved. But I think that's a big step that's coming that could be a breakthrough for the market. So it's kind of nice to watch those strategies, see how they would have worked out. When you have the liquidity, when you have the tight spreads, then maybe you'll be ready to go, because it's not the same as trading equities. I think you could easily agree with that. Some of these things move so fast and so large, you got to be ready to deal with them when you enter those sorts of strategies.
No, it's a different beast entirely out here, which is what makes it fun. Makes it fun for us to talk about. Makes it fun for you guys to listen to and write in. That music, unfortunately, means we've come to the end. You guys keep those questions coming. We love to hear. Probably could do a whole Q&A show here. Maybe we will do that, because that's kind of fun and exciting for me. I like to hear what you guys have on the brain. Keep those questions, those comments coming. We love to hear from you guys here. And John, we're glad you could join us here for a nice, fun breakdown of all things technical in the world of crypto. Maybe if folks are intrigued, they want to learn more, or maybe you want to leave them a little bit of a hint, a little bit of a tease of your thoughts, your outlook over there and all things TA when it comes to crypto. Now is the time, sir. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Mark. And, to the folks listening, I think it's an important time to keep your eye on the market. It has not moved in these dramatic ways as it was 2 or 3 months ago. But, that's what consolidation patterns do. And even though the range is bigger than most assets you'd look at, when it breaks out, you're going to see some big moves. We would caution that I think sooner than later, or we're running out of time. And that's the nature of the markets. If it doesn't move up, it's likely to move down. So we're bullish at the moment, but we've got that downside, stop in mind. And if it wants to blow through there, believe it. Be very careful.
Believe it. I like that. And John, if folks are intrigued, they want to learn more, maybe they want to reach out to you directly, where should they go? What should they do?
You can find us at cryptopatterns.net, where we offer our newsletter or, individual technical analysis. If you're looking for some studies, just let us know. We're happy to help.
There you go. Check them out, cryptopatterns.net. We feature some of their analysis over there at theoptionsinsider.com as well, so you can always head on over there and kick the tires. And if you want the full kit and caboodle, you want to really dive deep into all things TA on crypto, cryptopatterns.net, easy for me to say, is the place to go. Give them a follow on Twitter while you're at it as well. They're at cryptopatterns on the old Twitter machine. And on behalf of John and myself, I want to thank all of you out there for downloading, streaming, subscribing, for keeping those questions coming. We love to hear from you guys. Remember, if you like what you're listening to, get out there, help some new crypto traders discover the show, leave a review on your platform of choice. For this show, even more than others, it's really important to keep that new flow coming. We love to see all of them in there. We love to see you, and hopefully we'll see you back here next week for more of the Crypto Rundown.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. The Options Insider Radio Network is sponsored by Fidelity Investments. Fidelity's Option Trade Builder tool can help you confidently build an options trade in 3 simple steps. Just choose a strategy, select a contract, and then review the benefits and risks of the trade. Learn more about Option Trade Builder at fidelity.com/options. Options trading entails significant risk and is not appropriate for all investors. Certain complex option strategies carry additional risk. Before trading options, contact Fidelity Investments by calling 800-544-5115 to receive a copy of the characteristics and risks of standardized options. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE SIPC.